The river did not move that morning. It lay like glass beneath the weight of dawn, its surface holding the faint reflection of a gray sky and the bare branches leaning toward it. Even the wind seemed hesitant to touch it, curling instead through the reeds along the banks. Above that stillness, a raven flew. Its wings cut the air in slow, steady strokes, each movement silent but sure. The sound that followed was not of flight, but of presence, a whisper of feathers passing through cold air, the rhythm of something that had learned the shape of silence. From above, the river seemed endless. It wound through the valley like an old scar, wide and unmoving, bordered by fields that had long stopped belonging to anyone. The houses, where they still stood, had lost their color, wood gone silver from years of rain and absence. The raven tilted one wing, circling lower. Near the bend where the water widened, a bridge crossed, a skeleton of planks and iron. Beneath it, a man stood at the edge of the riverbank. His coat was heavy, his boots sunk into mud dark with thaw. He held a stick in one hand, tracing slow lines in the wet earth, his gaze fixed on the water that refused to move. The raven landed on a broken post near the bridge. Its claws clicked against the wood. It cocked its head, one black eye catching the faint light. The man looked up. For a long time, neither moved. The bird's gaze was steady, sharp as winter air. The man's expression was not surprise, but something quieter. Recognition. "You again," he said softly, his breath forming a pale cloud. His voice broke the stillness, but did not disturb it. The sound fell flat, swallowed by the damp air. "You keep coming back," he said, "even when there's nothing left here." The raven shifted, feathers rippling once. A drop of water fell from the post into the river below, breaking the reflection for an instant before it smoothed again. The man smiled faintly. "You see it, don't you? The way it doesn't move anymore. Used to rush through here. Used to roar in spring. Now it just watches." The bird tilted its head the other way as if listening. He crouched and touched the water. It was cold, too cold for the season. The surface rippled outward from his hand, small and reluctant, like an old habit trying to return. The raven croaked once, a low, guttural sound, and spread its wings. It didn't fly away immediately. Instead, it lifted just high enough to hover, circling above the man, casting a single shadow that swayed over the river like a thought that couldn't settle. The man stood, his reflection stretched beside the bird's shadow, two shapes in motion over stillness. "I came back to bury something," he said, though there was no one to answer. Not a person, just time. The raven landed again, closer this time, on the railing of the bridge. The man looked at it and felt, absurdly, that the air itself was listening through the bird's eyes. "Do you remember?" he asked. "There used to be a boy here, throwing stones at the river. His father shouting from the porch. The smell of smoke in autumn. The sound of everything." The raven blinked. A small gust stirred, carrying the faint scent of pine and ash. The man stepped closer to the bridge and placed something small on the railing. A silver watch, its face cracked, its hands forever pointing to a moment long gone. He exhaled. "You can have it. You seem to remember better than I do." The raven hopped forward, studied the watch for a moment, then let out a single short call. It echoed strangely, bouncing off the water and the hills beyond. Then, the bird spread its wings and lifted into the air, climbing higher, until it became a dark smudge against the pale sky. The man watched it go. The silence it left behind felt heavier than before, as though the world itself had paused to listen. When he looked back at the river, the watch was gone. Only the faint ripple of disturbed water remained, widening, fading, vanishing. He stared for a while, waiting for the current to move, for anything to change. But the river stayed still, patient as stone. He turned toward the house on the hill, the last one still standing, its roof bowed, its windows empty, and began to walk. His boots left no sound in the soft ground. Above him, the raven wheeled once more, silent now, its black wings cutting through the pale morning. The river did not answer. It only held its silence, deep, unbroken, eternal. And the raven flew on, carrying with it the echo of a voice that had never truly left. The second morning came without color. The sky was the same flat gray as the river, and the air carried the smell of water and rust. The silence was so complete that even the sound of his own breath seemed misplaced. Thomas sat by the window of the old house, his hands wrapped around a cup of cold coffee. The fire had gone out hours ago. He hadn't noticed until now. From the window, he could see the river, the same strip of dull silver winding through the valley, unmoving, as if holding its breath. The birch trees along the far bank stood bare, their reflections sharp and perfect in the glassy water, and above it all, the raven. It circled slowly, barely moving its wings, riding the faint currents that rose from the land as it warmed. Every few moments it would dip lower, skimming just above the surface before climbing again. He had expected it not to return, yet here it was, as if tethered to the place, or to him. He set the cup down, stood, and crossed the room. The floorboards creaked under his boots. Dust shifted in the light. The house smelled of damp wood, ash, and something faintly metallic. Memory, perhaps, left to rust. When he stepped outside, the raven was perched on the broken fence near the well. It turned its head as he approached, the black curve of its beak gleaming faintly. "You again," he said quietly. "Still watching." The bird ruffled its feathers but didn't move. He walked past it toward the river. The mud squelched beneath his boots. The air felt heavier the closer he got, thick with the smell of standing water. When he reached the bank, he stopped. The surface was so still it reflected him perfectly. His worn coat, his lined face, the pale ghost of smoke rising from the chimney behind him. Only his breath disturbed the image. He crouched down, touched the surface again. Cold, unchanged. The raven croaked behind him, sharp and brief. Thomas looked up. "You think I'm talking to myself," he said, "but I think you know what I'm doing here." The bird hopped along the fence rail, closer. Its eyes, small, bright, and unblinking, caught the gray light like drops of oil. "I didn't come to stay," Thomas continued. "I came to remember." The wind stirred, faint and tired. Across the water, the trees shivered, scattering a few loose twigs into the current, or what passed for it. The twigs floated but did not drift. He felt the weight of it then, the stillness, not just the river, but everything. The air, the ground, even the sound. It was as if the valley had decided that motion was no longer worth the effort. The raven let out another sound, deeper this time. Not a call, but something like a question. Thomas turned toward it. "You were here when it happened, weren't you?" The bird tilted its head. "When the river stopped," he said. "When everything else left." For a moment, there was only the sound of the wind moving through the dead reeds. Then, faintly, something shifted beneath the water. A ripple so slight it could have been a trick of the eye. He stepped back. The surface stilled again. The raven flew to the ground, landing a few paces from him. It pecked once at the mud, then looked up, its head jerking slightly, as if trying to point toward the bridge. Thomas followed its gaze. The bridge stood crooked and thin against the horizon. From here, he could see where one of the supports had given way, leaving a section hanging just above the water. He walked toward it, the raven following overhead. Its shadow passed over him like a stain of ink sliding across the ground. When he reached the bridge, he stopped beneath the broken beam. The boards creaked faintly in the wind. Beneath them, the water reflected the wood, the sky, the birds circling above, all without distortion. Something about that perfection felt wrong. He picked up a small stone and dropped it. It hit the surface without a sound. No splash, no ripple. It vanished like it had never been there. The raven let out a harsh, scraping cry that echoed through the valley, sharp enough to make him flinch. The air changed. For the first time in days, he heard something move, the faint rumble of shifting water deep below the surface. Then, silence again. The bird landed on the railing above him. Its feathers were puffed, its head cocked as though listening for an answer that would not come. Thomas exhaled slowly. "You hear it too." He turned back toward the house. The raven followed, silent now. That night the wind rose. It rattled the loose boards, whistled through the broken panes. Thomas lay awake listening to it. Between gusts, he could hear the faint sound of wings, a rhythm that came and went like a heartbeat. When he finally drifted to sleep, he dreamed of the river moving again. Not fast, not clear, but alive, carrying fragments of leaves and lost words down through the valley. In the dream, the raven flew low over the current, calling out into the dark. And this time, something answered. But when Thomas woke, the only sound was silence. The river lay still, the world unmoving. And high above the valley, the raven circled again, patient, tireless, waiting for the moment when silence would finally speak back. The fog returned with the thaw, soft and patient, rising from the ground like something the earth had tried to forget but couldn't. The river still didn't move, but it looked different now, darker, heavier, as though something beneath its surface had begun to stir. For 3 days, the raven stayed close. Thomas saw it every morning, perched on the same birch branch near the bridge, feathers slick with mist. It didn't call much anymore, it only watched. He began to notice small things. At first, they seemed meaningless. A piece of weathered rope near the well that hadn't been there before. A nail driven into the old fence, rusted but freshly disturbed. And one morning, a fragment of blue cloth snagged in a reed by the water. A strip torn from a coat he recognized. He stared at it for a long time before touching it. His father's coat. He had burned it years ago, on a night that smelled of rain and smoke. The fire had been meant to mark an ending, a clean break from the weight of this place. Yet here it was again, or something like it, fluttering faintly in the wet breeze. He looked up. The raven sat above him, still and silent, its dark eyes reflecting the dull gray of the sky. "You brought this?" Thomas asked. The bird said nothing. It only turned its head slightly, the way creatures do when they already know the answer. He took the strip of cloth and set it on the bridge railing. The texture was rough, gritty with mud, and it smelled faintly of the river. "You remember more than I do," he said quietly. The raven let out a low croak, not a call, but a sound that carried weight, almost human in its sadness. That afternoon, he followed the river north, past the bend where the reeds grew thick and brittle. The raven followed overhead, its shadow sliding across the ground beside him like a second self. The land there was broken, the remains of an old mill, half swallowed by earth. Stones leaned against each other like bones. The wheel lay on its side, frozen in a bed of moss. He remembered it now, the day the flood came years ago, when the river still had a voice. The mill had gone first, then the bridge, then the farm, and afterward, nothing. He knelt by the riverbank, scooping a handful of mud. Beneath the surface, he found splinters of wood, shards of glass, and something small and round, a button. The raven landed near him, its claws sinking into the wet ground. It watched as he turned the button in his hand, washed it in the shallow water. His mother's coat. He'd recognize it anywhere. He closed his hand around it. "You're showing me what's left," he said softly. "But why now?" The raven's wings fluttered once, shedding droplets of water. It hopped closer, head tilting, as if searching his face for something he didn't know how to give. He sighed. "You think I can fix it?" The bird blinked. Its reflection rippled faintly on the river's skin. The only thing in the valley still capable of movement. That night he laid the button, the strip of cloth, and the piece of rope on the table inside the house. They looked like offerings, remnants of a life still asking to be remembered. He didn't light the fire. He just sat there, the silence of the room broken only by the faint scrape of the raven's claws on the windowsill outside. When he finally slept, his dreams were full of motion, not of running water, but of sound. Voices, laughter, a door slamming in the wind, the smell of bread, the rhythm of footsteps on the bridge. He woke before dawn. The sky was pale and colorless. The raven was gone. He stepped outside, the air cold enough to bite. The river looked the same, but the reflections on its surface had changed. They were not still anymore. Faint ripples ran through them, small and uneven, like a heartbeat struggling to return. From somewhere upstream came a sound, not wind, not thunder, water, slow, deliberate, moving. He turned toward it, heart pounding, breath visible in the chill. The river was coming alive again, inch by inch, sound by sound. The current crept through the valley, dragging light across its surface. The reeds bent, whispering against each other, and high above, circling in the soft gray dawn, the raven cried out, sharp and clear this time, not mournful, but triumphant. The sound echoed across the valley, answering the river, calling it back into motion. Thomas watched the water begin to move past his boots, washing away the silt, erasing the old tracks. "You did it," he said to the bird above him. "You made it remember." The raven dipped once in the air, a single black shape against the widening light. And for the first time in years, the valley breathed. The river flowed, the silence broke, and everything that had once been forgotten began, quietly, to return. When the river began to move again, it did so like something waking from a long dream, slow, uncertain, carrying the weight of forgotten years in every ripple. It didn't roar or rush, it whispered, and the valley, as if holding its breath, leaned in to listen. Thomas stood on the bridge, both hands resting on the railing, slick with morning dew. The air was heavy with the smell of wet earth, moss, and the faint sweetness of thawed roots. The sound below him was fragile, a thin stream threading through silt and stone, but it was enough. It was motion, and motion meant life. Above him, the raven circled. The bird moved in wide, unhurried arcs, wings stretched wide against the lightening sky. Every so often, it would dip low, skim the air just above the river's surface, then climb again with a single, smooth pull of its wings. He had stopped questioning why it stayed. Some mornings, the raven disappeared for hours, only to return with small things in its beak. Bits of straw, a piece of broken glass, a rusted key. It left them near the bridge or on the porch, like messages in a language Thomas had begun to understand. He never took them inside. He let them stay where they were, and rain soon softened them into the ground. It felt right that way. By late spring, color had returned to the valley. The grass along the riverbank grew thick, green, and alive with insects. The birches shimmered in the wind. The stillness that had once suffocated the place was gone, replaced by a rhythm, small, steady, constant. Thomas worked in the fields again, clearing what was left of the old fence line, stacking stones, setting posts. He didn't need the land to feed him anymore, but the act itself, the touch of soil, the movement of his hands, felt like speaking. Each evening he walked to the river. It had carved a shallow channel again, not deep yet, but flowing, an echo of what it used to be. Sometimes the raven would land near him, its black feathers gleaming blue in the low light. It never came close, but its presence filled the space between them with something like understanding. "You remember for both of us," Thomas said once. "That's your gift, or your curse." The raven tilted its head, watching him. Then, with a sudden leap, it spread its wings and lifted off, flying low along the water. Its shadow slid across the current, and for an instant, Thomas thought he saw something within it, reflections moving not just of the bird, but of people, faces, moments he couldn't quite recall. It vanished as quickly as it came, leaving behind only the real, living river. That night, a storm came. The rain began softly, then grew heavier, drumming against the roof and the windows until the whole house trembled. Thomas sat by the door, watching the lightning flare through the valley, each flash revealing the silver gleam of the swollen river below. He thought of the flood that had once destroyed everything, the roar, the collapse, the silence that had followed. But this storm was different. The river no longer resisted. It accepted. It carried the water forward, steady, alive. And above the thunder, he heard the raven. It called out again and again, its voice cutting through the storm like a blade, echoing from tree to tree. It wasn't fear. It wasn't warning. It was defiance, life proclaiming itself into the noise. Thomas stepped out into the rain. It drenched him instantly, cold and clean. The river below was no longer still. It surged and shone like molten glass, alive with reflection and sound. Lightning flared once more, and in that brief, blinding moment, he saw the raven gliding over the water, wings spread wide, body dark against the electric sky. It dipped low, skimmed the surface, and for an instant, its wingtips touched the current. The water rippled outward, glowing faintly, and Thomas could swear he saw light running through it, pale and silver, like veins beneath skin. When the thunder rolled away, the world was different. By dawn, the storm had passed. The air was clean and mist rose from the valley floor. The river ran full now, its surface glinting with new light. Birds gathered along its banks, their calls sharp and bright. The raven perched on the bridge again, feathers slick and shining, head bowed slightly as if in thought. Thomas walked toward it. "You did it," he said. "You woke it." The raven looked up. Its eyes caught the sunrise, and for the first time, Thomas saw color in them. Not just black, but depth. Reflections of gold, gray, and the faintest trace of blue. "You brought the past back," he said, "but not to trap it, to let it move." The bird blinked once, then lifted off, rising higher and higher until it was just a dark speck against the pale morning. Thomas stood on the bridge a long while listening to the river's voice. Low, continuous, unbroken. The valley no longer felt haunted. It felt alive. The past hadn't returned to punish or forgive. It had simply learned how to flow again. And as the raven vanished into the wide, clean sky, the river below answered at last, not with words, but with movement. It sang quietly, endlessly, carrying memory downstream where it belonged.